The flashing red and blue lights in the rearview mirror were only the opening sentence of a nightmare that would expose every rotten corner of small-town power. What happens when an arrogant local cop targets the wrong driver? A 3-star general who commands the nation's military? This is not merely a story of abused authority. It is a masterclass in absolute devastating karma. Stay with me, and you will see how one telephone call to the Pentagon shattered a rigged system overnight and permanently ended a predator's career. Lieutenant General Elijah Brooks had walked through war zones in the Middle East, coordinated multinational defense strategies in Brussels, and briefed the President of the United States inside the Situation Room. Yet, as he drove the lonely stretch of U.S. Route 29 through rural Virginia on a crisp Thursday evening in late October, he was about to confront an entirely different kind of hostility. Brooks was officially on a rare 2-week leave, heading back to Washington, D.C. after a quiet family gathering in North Carolina. He wore a faded gray University of Michigan sweatshirt, soft denim jeans, and scuffed leather loafers. The only quiet markers of who he truly was were the silver West Point class ring on his right hand and the heavy, custom-engraved dog tags resting cool against his chest beneath the cotton. He drove a pristine late-model charcoal Chevrolet Tahoe, not flashy but spotless, well-maintained, and carrying the same quiet authority as the man behind the wheel. The digital speedometer held steady at exactly 55 miles per hour. Cruise control engaged. A low John Coltrane track drifted through the speakers, the complex saxophone lines washing over the residual tension of his high-stakes assignment as Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations at the Pentagon. 10 miles outside the jurisdiction of Oak Haven County, a notorious speed trap stretch known among locals as a jurisdictional black hole, a black and white Ford Police Interceptor sat idling behind a weathered billboard. Inside the cruiser, Officer Clayton Harlan was bored, irritable, and hunting for any excuse to flex what little power he possessed. Harlan was a man whose ambition had long outrun his competence. Passed over for promotion 3 times, he ruled his 2-mile stretch of asphalt with the petty tyranny of someone desperate for respect he had never earned. Beside him sat rookie Officer Tyler Reed, 23 years old and fresh out of the academy, still clinging to the idealistic belief that a badge existed to protect people rather than prey on them. As the Tahoe glided past the billboard, Harlan's eyes narrowed. The brief wash of streetlight illuminated the driver's seat. He saw a black man behind the wheel of a high-end late-model SUV. "Look at this guy," Harlan muttered, dropping the cruiser into drive. "Tahoe like that runs 70, 80 grand easy. Let's see what he's running from." "Radar never clocked him speeding, Clayton," Reed said nervously, glancing at the dash display. "He was dead on 55. "He crossed the yellow line," Harlan lied smoothly, flipping the switch for the light bar. "Failure to maintain a lane. That's reasonable suspicion, rookie. Take notes." Inside the Tahoe, Brooks saw the Christmas tree eruption of lights fill his rearview mirror. A deep, weary sigh left him. He checked the high-end Garmin dash camera mounted behind the mirror, confirming it was recording both audio and video. Then he signaled, pulled the heavy SUV onto the gravel shoulder with textbook precision, shifted into park, killed the engine, rolled down all 4 windows, a deliberate courtesy so the officer would feel safer, and placed his large, calloused hands at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel. He knew the drill. He had grown up in the Deep South. 3 stars on a uniform collar protected him inside the Pentagon. Out here on a dark highway in civilian clothes, he was just another target. Harlan approached the driver's side, hand resting aggressively on the butt of his sidearm. Reed hung back near the rear quarter panel, flashlight trained on the back seat. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Harlan barked, leaning in close and invading Brooks's personal space. No greeting, no stated reason for the stop. Just a command dripping with contempt. "Good evening, officer," Brooks answered. His voice was a deep, resonant baritone shaped by decades of commanding thousands of troops. utterly devoid of fear. That absence of fear irritated Harlan instantly. "I didn't ask for a weather report," Harlan snapped. "I said license and registration, now." Brooks moved slowly, telegraphing every motion. "My wallet is in my back right pocket. Registration is in the glove compartment. I am going to reach for them now." Harlan sneered. "Just get them, and no sudden moves unless you want to find out how fast I can draw." Brooks retrieved the leather wallet. Nestled behind his Virginia driver's license was his olive green Department of Defense Common Access card, clearly displaying the rank of Lieutenant General. He made a split-second tactical decision. He slid out only the civilian license and the rental agreement. If the officer was operating in good faith, the civilian identification would be enough. If he was not, revealing the military rank too early would only give the man an excuse to claim the card was fake. Brooks wanted to see exactly how this department operated. Harlan snatched the cards from Brooks's fingers and shone his maglite directly into the general's eyes. "Elijah, huh? Where you headed, Eli?" "Home," Brooks said simply, squinting against the glare but never looking away. "Washington." "Washington?" Harlan mocked. "Long way from home. Whose car is this? You borrow it from a friend? Your boss?" "It is a rental," Brooks replied evenly, "as the paperwork in your hand indicates." "Don't get smart with me," Harlan warned, tapping the flashlight against the door frame. "You look nervous, Elijah. You got anything in this vehicle I need to know about? Drugs, weapons, large amounts of cash?" "No, officer. I am perfectly calm, and there is no contraband in the vehicle. May I ask why I was pulled over?" Harlan leaned closer, face twisting. "You swerved, almost ran me off the road back there." It was a blatant, fabricated lie. Brooks's grip on the steering wheel tightened by a fraction of a millimeter. He knew exactly what this was. He had spent a lifetime fighting for a country that still, in quiet corners like this, harbored men who viewed him as lesser. "I see," Brooks said softly. The calmness of the response seemed to enrage Harlan further. The officer spun on his heel and marched back to the cruiser to run the name, leaving Brooks sitting in the cold night air. The trap was set, and Harlan was determined to spring it. Inside the cruiser, Harlan punched the name into the mobile data terminal. The screen blinked. No warrants, no criminal history, clean driving record, valid license. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel. "Nothing. Guy is squeaky clean." "So we write a warning and cut him loose?" Reed asked, hoping to de-escalate. The entire stop felt wrong. The driver had done nothing, and his demeanor was completely non-threatening. "No," Harlan growled. "I know his type. Arrogant. Thinks he's untouchable. Squeaky clean just means he hasn't been caught yet. I'm tossing the car. I guarantee we find something." "Clayton, we don't have probable cause to search," Reed protested weakly. "I thought I smelled marijuana when he rolled the window down," Harlan said, staring hard at the rookie. The implication was clear. Back my play, or your career ends before it starts. Reed swallowed and looked away. "Right, marijuana." Harlan marched back to the Tahoe. He did not return the license. Instead, he slapped the roof of the SUV. "All right, Elijah, step out of the vehicle." Brooks did not move immediately. "Officer, my record is clear. You have my license. I have answered your questions. Am I receiving a citation for the alleged lane violation, or am I free to go?" "You're stepping out of the damn car," Harlan yelled, hand returning to his holster. "I smell marijuana coming from the cabin. That gives me probable cause. Now step out, or I will drag you out." Brooks looked at him. The same look he had given insubordinate colonels who tried to cut corners during combat exercises. Absolute, piercing authority. "Officer, I do not smoke. I have never smoked. There is no marijuana in this vehicle. I do not consent to any searches of my property. I am asking for a supervisor to be called to this location immediately." The invocation of rights, the demand for a supervisor, the utter lack of subservience. It shattered Harlan's fragile ego. "I'm the only supervisor you need," he screamed. He yanked the heavy door open and lunged into the cabin, grabbing Brooks by the collar of the University of Michigan sweatshirt and hauling outward. Brooks, a man who maintained a rigorous physical regimen, could have broken Harlan's wrist and neutralized him in 3 seconds. But discipline held. He knew the statistics. He knew what happened to black men who fought back against police on dark highways, regardless of who was in the right. He went limp, allowing Harlan to drag him out so the officer could never claim resistance. Harlan slammed him face first against the cold metal of the Tahoe. "Put your hands behind your back." He drove a knee into Brooks's hamstring. Brooks complied silently. Cold steel bit viciously into his wrists as the cuffs ratcheted down hard enough to restrict blood flow. "Officer Reed," Brooks said, voice strained but perfectly steady, addressing the frozen rookie a few feet away. "Please note the time. Please note that I am fully compliant. And please note that your partner is initiating an unlawful arrest without probable cause." "Shut your mouth." Harlan shoved Brooks's head against the glass. "Watch him, Reed. I'm tossing the car." For the next 20 minutes, Harlan tore the pristine Tahoe apart. Neatly folded civilian clothes landed in the dusty gravel. A leather shaving kit was unzipped and dumped across the driver's seat. Floor mats were ripped up. Nothing, absolutely nothing illegal. Then he popped the trunk. Sitting beside a set of Callaway golf clubs was a heavy matte black Pelican case secured with 2 heavy-duty steel padlocks. Well, well, well," Harlan muttered, eyes lighting up. "What do we have here?" He dragged the case out and dropped it onto the asphalt. "What's in the box, Eli? The product? The cash? Give me the keys." Brooks turned his head. The case contained highly classified Department of Defense briefing materials on a joint forces operation in the Indo-Pacific. It was illegal for anyone without top-secret SCI clearance even to look at the folders, let alone a corrupt small-town cop. "Officer Harlan," Brooks said, reading the name tag. "That case contains sensitive materials. It is the property of the United States government. You are not authorized to open it. I strongly advise you to stop what you are doing, remove these cuffs, and call your police chief." Harlan laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Property of the U.S. government? What, you a secret agent now? You expect me to believe a guy like you is working for the feds?" "I expect you to follow the law," Brooks answered. Harlan tried a crowbar from his cruiser. The hardened steel locks did not budge. Frustrated, sweating, and humiliated that his imagined drug bust was evaporating in front of the rookie's eyes, he made the worst decision of his life. "You're under arrest," he declared, storming over. "On what charge?" Brooks asked calmly. "Obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, and suspicion of transporting contraband. We're impounding the vehicle. We'll get a warrant and cut that box open at the station. Get in the cruiser." Harlan grabbed him by the arms and forced him into the cramped, hard plastic back seat of the Ford Interceptor. As the door slammed shut, sealing him inside the cage, Brooks closed his eyes and drew a deep breath. He had given Harlan every opportunity to walk away. The officer had chosen to accelerate over the cliff. The time for de-escalation was over. It was time for a surgical strike. The ride to the Oak Haven Police Department took less than 15 minutes. Harlan spent the entire drive lecturing Reed from the front seat, deliberately raising his voice so Brooks could hear through the plexiglass. "This is how real police work is done, Reed. These guys think they can cruise through our town with their fancy cars and locked boxes, thinking we're just dumb hicks. We're going to crack that case open, find the dope, and make the front page of the county paper." In the back, Brooks sat in uncomfortable silence, shoulders aching from the unnatural angle of the cuffs. He watched the small town of Oak Haven roll past, a faded main street, a pair of closed diners, a hardware store, until the low-slung cinder block building that served as police headquarters appeared. They hauled him inside. The station was quiet, manned only by a sleepy desk sergeant named Raymond Colton. "What do we got, Clayton?" Colton asked, looking over the rim of his reading glasses as Harlan shoved Brooks toward the booking desk. Got a live one. Refused a search, acting suspicious. Got a locked safe in his trunk, he won't open. Impound the Tahoe. I'm writing up the warrant request for a judge right now. Empty your pockets. Colton sighed and slid a plastic bin across the counter. The cuffs came off. Brooks massaged his bruised wrists, expression utterly blank. He placed his keys, a pack of peppermint gum, and a heavy tungsten pen into the bin. Colton opened the wallet to inventory the cash, pulled out the civilian driver's license, and never looked at the other cards layered behind it. He never saw the Department of Defense insignia. Take his shoelaces and his belt. Put him in cell 3, Harlan ordered. I'm going to get my crowbar. Warrant or no warrant, I'm finding out what's in that box. I would strongly advise against tampering with that case, Officer Harlan, Brooks said, voice echoing in the drab booking room. If you break those seals, you will be committing a federal felony. Throw him in the cage, Harlan sneered, turning his back. Brooks was escorted down a short hallway and locked into a small, cold holding cell that smelled of bleach and stale sweat. A metal bench was bolted to the wall. An exposed toilet sat in the corner. Across the hall hung a heavy metal payphone. Brooks sat on the bench. He did not pace. He did not yell. He sat with the perfect posture of a man who had endured sear, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, training. He mentally reviewed the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the jurisdictional boundaries of the Posse Comitatus Act, and the federal statutes governing the detainment of a high-ranking military official. An hour passed, then 2. The station remained relatively quiet except for the muffled sound of Harlan swearing from the garage as he failed, again and again, to crack the Pelican case. Finally, footsteps approached the cell. It was Rookie Reed, looking anxious, carrying a clipboard. Hey, Reed said softly, glancing around to make sure Harlan was not nearby. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Harlan's trying to get a judge on the phone for a warrant, but it's late. You have the right to a phone call. You want to call a lawyer or something? Maybe they can talk some sense into him. Brooks stood and walked to the bars. He looked down at the young officer and saw the hesitation in his eyes, the realization that something was terribly wrong, and the lack of courage to stop it. I will take my phone call now, Officer Reed, Brooks said, but I will not be calling a lawyer. Reed unlocked the cell and escorted him across the hall to the wall phone. Dial 9 to get an outside line. Brooks picked up the heavy plastic receiver. He did not dial a 1-800 number for a local attorney. He dialed a highly classified 11-digit sequence. The line clicked. It did not ring. After 2 seconds, a crisp professional voice answered. National Military Command Center. Authenticate. Brooks shielded his mouth slightly, lowering his voice. This is Lieutenant General Elijah Brooks. Authentication code Echo 7 Tango 9er Bravo. A brief pause as the DoD systems verified the voice biometric and the rolling access code. Authentication confirmed, General Brooks. Go ahead, sir. Do we have a situation? I need to be patched through to General Jack Stanton, Army Chief of Staff. Wake him if you have to. Patch him to this number on a secure bridge. Stand by, sir. 60 seconds later, a gruff, sleep-heavy voice came on the line. Eli, it's 2 in the morning. You're supposed to be on leave, fishing in the Outer Banks. Are the Russians moving on the border? No, Jack. Nothing like that. A faint, grim smile touched Brooks's lips. I'm currently sitting in a holding cell at the Oak Haven County Police Department in Virginia. Dead silence. Then Stanton's voice returned, wide awake and razor sharp. Say again, Eli. You're in a local jail. Was there an accident? No accident. I was subjected to a pretextual traffic stop by an aggressive local officer. No probable cause. He escalated, illegally searched my rental vehicle, and cuffed me. I am currently being held without legitimate charges. Stanton let out a long, slow breath. Are you injured? Bruised wrists. Nothing broken. But Jack, he impounded the vehicle, and he has my secure Pelican case, the one containing the Pacific Fleet deployment briefs. The silence that followed was terrifying. When Stanton spoke again, his voice was cold enough to freeze nitrogen. He has top-secret classified materials. He's currently in their garage trying to pry it open with a crowbar, Brooks confirmed, eyes locking onto Reed, who watched with growing unease. Eli, you give me the word, and I will scramble a team from Quantico so fast the sonic boom will shatter their windows. I'll have the FBI hostage rescue team kick their doors in. No, Brooks said calmly. Keep it clean, Jack. I don't want a shootout. I want accountability. Contact the Provost Marshal. Send a military police detachment from Fort Belvoir. Get the Department of Justice on the line, specifically the Civil Rights Division. And Jack, bring the heavy hitters. I want this precinct fully locked down before sunrise. I want this handled by the book so thoroughly that these officers never wear a badge again. Copy that, General. Stanton dropped the informal tone, shifting entirely into wartime command mode. ETA for advanced elements is 45 minutes. Do not let them open that case. Hang tight, Eli. The cavalry is coming. Brooks hung up. The loud clack of the receiver hitting the cradle echoed in the quiet hallway. Reed stepped forward, face pale. Did you get your lawyer? Brooks turned. He looked at the rookie, then down the hall toward the garage where Harlan was still banging away. No, Officer Reed, he said softly, voice carrying the weight of the coming storm. I called my employer. They're on their way to sort this out. He walked back into the cell, pulled the door shut behind him, sat on the metal bench, laced his fingers together, and waited for the wrath of the United States military to descend upon Oak Haven County. In the poorly lit garage, Officer Clayton Harlan was losing his mind. He stood over the matte black Pelican case, chest heaving, a sheen of sweat coating his forehead. At his feet lay a bent crowbar, a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters with chipped blades, and a power drill with a snapped titanium bit. The case remained completely impenetrable. Son of a bitch, he yelled, kicking the side of the container. It barely moved. He stormed back into the booking area. Rookie Reed sat on a stool near the dispatch desk, nervously biting his fingernails. Desk Sergeant Colton was pouring a stale cup of coffee. Colton, get Judge Peterson on the phone, Harlan barked, pointing a trembling finger. Wake him up. Tell him I need a sledgehammer warrant for this box. I've got a suspected high-level trafficker in cell 3 refusing to cooperate. Colton looked at the clock. It was 3:15 a.m. Peterson hates being woken for anything less than a homicide. Clayton, you sure about this? The guy back there doesn't look like a trafficker. I don't care what he looks like. Harlan slammed his palm on the counter. Call the judge. Before Colton could reach for the receiver, the dispatch console lit up. It was not a standard 911 call. It was the emergency interagency frequency, a line that almost never flashed unless there was a multi-state catastrophe. Colton pressed the blinking red button. Oak Haven Dispatch. Oak Haven Dispatch. This is the Virginia State Police. Troop Division 1, operating on behalf of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Be advised, all Oak Haven units are to stand down immediately. Do not leave the premises. Acknowledge. Colton froze. He looked at Harlan, color draining from his face. State Police, copy that. We are holding our positions. What is the nature of the emergency? Nature of emergency is a joint federal and military operation. Do not touch the prisoner in holding. Do not approach the impounded vehicle. ETA is less than 2 minutes. Out. Military? Harlan scoffed, trying to mask the sudden icy knot forming in his stomach. What the hell is this? Reed, did you call someone? I didn't do anything, Reed stammered, stepping away. He just made his one phone call. That's it. Across town, in a sprawling suburban house, Oak Haven Police Chief Thomas Weber was jolted awake by the shrill ringing of his private cell phone. Weber was a political survivor who liked keeping his small department off the radar. He fumbled for the phone, squinting at the caller ID, a Washington, D.C. area code. "Weber," he grumbled. "Chief Thomas Weber. This is Assistant Attorney General Richard Hayes, Civil Rights Division, Department of Justice. I have the special agent in charge of the Richmond FBI field office and the provost marshal for the military district of Washington on this line." Weber sat straight up in bed, instantly wide awake. Yes, sir. How can I help you?" "Chief Weber, exactly 7 minutes ago, the Pentagon informed me that one of your officers abducted a 3-star United States Army general, illegally impounded his vehicle, and is currently attempting to break into a classified Department of Defense container." Weber's blood ran cold. "General, sir, there must be some mistake. We haven't arrested any military personnel." "The officer's name is Clayton Harlan," the assistant AG snapped, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "He is holding Lieutenant General Elijah Brooks. If your officer successfully breaches that container, he will be committing a violation of the Espionage Act. I have a federal task force pulling up to your station right now. I suggest you get down there and pray your officer hasn't done anything to harm that general, or your department won't exist by sunrise." The line went dead. Weber dropped the phone onto the mattress, hands shaking violently. He knew Harlan. He knew the man's reputation for pushing boundaries, for racially profiling drivers on Route 29. Weber had looked the other way because Harlan brought in revenue through seized assets. "Oh God," he whispered, scrambling out of bed and grabbing his pants. He had pulled over the Pentagon. Back at the station, the faint rhythmic thumping of heavy rotor blades began to vibrate the cinder-block walls. It started as a low hum and quickly built into a deafening roar. Harlan drew his weapon, eyes darting frantically toward the front doors. "What is that?" Reed yelled over the noise, covering his ears. "Helicopter," Colton said, staring out the reinforced front window into the parking lot. His jaw dropped. "Clayton, put the gun down. Put it down right now." Through the window, Harlan saw them. They were not local squad cars. Half a dozen black-armored Chevrolet Suburbans screeched into the small parking lot, blocking every exit. Dust kicked up violently as a massive dark-painted UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter hovered mere feet above the adjacent empty lot, its powerful downwash bending the street lamps. Dozens of men in heavy tactical gear, armed with compact assault rifles, poured out of the vehicles. Half wore the dark windbreakers of the FBI. The other half wore OCP camouflage with bold black letters across their chests. CID, military police. Harlan's hands shook so badly he nearly dropped his Glock. The fantasy of the massive drug bust evaporated, replaced by the terrifying realization that he had trapped himself in a cage with a sleeping dragon, and the dragon had just woken up. The reinforced double doors of the Oak Haven Police Department were practically blown off their hinges. "FBI, federal agents, hands where we can see them." The lobby flooded with armed personnel. Red laser sights danced wildly across the drab walls, settling squarely on the chests of the 3 local cops. "Drop the weapon!" roared a massive man at the front of the formation, wearing a heavy Kevlar vest over a tailored suit. This was Special Agent in Charge Bradley Walsh. Next to him stood Army Colonel Gregory Hartman, face a mask of absolute terrifying discipline. Harlan, paralyzed by shock, did not immediately drop his gun. He stood frozen, brain failing to process the overwhelming show of force. Walsh drew his sidearm with blinding speed. "I said drop the weapon, officer. Do it now or you will be neutralized." The threat of imminent death finally snapped Harlan out of his trance. He dropped the Glock. It clattered loudly on the linoleum floor. In an instant, 2 FBI tactical agents rushed forward, shoved him against the booking counter, and kicked his legs apart. They ripped his duty belt from his waist and slapped heavy steel cuffs onto his wrists. "What are you doing?" Harlan shrieked, panic pitching his voice an octave higher. "I'm a police officer. I'm local law enforcement. You have no jurisdiction here." "You're a kidnapper," Colonel Hartman said, stepping forward. His voice was not loud, but it carried lethal weight. You have illegally detained a superior commanding officer of the United States Armed Forces. Where is General Brooks? Reed, whose hands were raised so high his shoulders ached, pointed a trembling finger down the hallway. Cell 3, sir. He's in cell 3. Hartman nodded to two heavily armed military police investigators. Secure the general now. The MPs jogged down the hall. A few seconds later, the metallic clank of the cell door unlocking echoed through the station. The entire lobby fell into a heavy, suffocating silence as Lieutenant General Elijah Brooks walked around the corner. He was still wearing his faded University of Michigan sweatshirt and jeans, but the aura of authority he projected was absolute. He walked with a calm, measured stride, unaffected by the chaos that had just descended upon the building. The moment Brooks stepped into the lobby, Colonel Hartman snapped to attention and executed a flawless, razor-sharp salute. Every single military police officer in the room immediately followed suit. General Brooks, sir, Hartman barked. Colonel Hartman, CID. The area is secure. Brooks returned the salute smoothly. Stand down, Colonel. Thank you for your prompt response. Harlan, currently pinned against the counter by two federal agents, twisted his neck to look at Brooks. The blood completely drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. His eyes widened in absolute, unfiltered horror. Elijah, the name he had mocked, the man he had slammed against a Tahoe, handcuffed and thrown in a cage like a stray dog. You, Harlan stammered, bravado entirely broken. You're a general. Brooks ignored him completely. He turned his attention to Special Agent Walsh. Agent Walsh, I presume my vehicle and the classified materials have been secured. Yes, General, Walsh replied respectfully. My agents have cordoned off the garage. The Pelican case appears to have minor exterior damage from a blunt instrument, but the locks are completely intact. The seals are unbroken. Excellent, Brooks nodded. I trust the Department of Justice will handle the processing of these individuals. Absolutely, sir. We have federal warrants for Officer Clayton Harlan for deprivation of rights under color of law, unlawful detention, and attempted tampering with classified federal property. Walsh turned to look at Harlan with deep disgust. He's looking at 20 years in federal prison before we even get to the civil suits. Just then, the front doors burst open again. Chief Thomas Weber rushed in, out of breath, uniform shirt, half untucked. He stopped dead in his tracks, taking in the scene. The FBI agents, the heavily armed military police, his rookie looking terrified, his veteran officer in cuffs, and the tall, imposing black man standing calmly in the center of it all. General Brooks, Weber gasped, stepping forward, hands held up in a placating gesture. Sir, I am Chief Weber. I cannot apologize enough for this catastrophic misunderstanding. If you will just allow me to handle this internally, Chief Weber, Brooks interrupted, voice resonant and commanding. There is no misunderstanding here. Your officer executed a textbook pretextual stop based on racial profiling. He fabricated evidence, committed an unlawful assault, and attempted to breach highly classified national security assets. Weber swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his neck. Sir, Harlan is a rogue element. This doesn't reflect my department. It reflects a severe failure of leadership, Chief, Brooks countered smoothly. I spent 3 hours in your holding cell. During that time, I accessed the public records of this department on my mobile device before it was confiscated. Officer Harlan has 22 formal complaints against him for excessive force and discriminatory policing in the last 4 years. You dismissed every single one of them. Weber shrank back as if he had been slapped. You tolerated a predator because he wore a badge, Brooks continued, stepping closer to the chief. You allowed a man who views the citizens he has sworn to protect as enemy combatants to patrol your streets. As of tonight, that ends. The Department of Justice is taking over your precinct. Every arrest Harlan has made will be audited by federal prosecutors. Every asset you have seized will be investigated. Brooks turned back to Harlan, who was practically hyperventilating against the desk. For the first time all night, Brooks addressed him directly. "You told me on the highway that you were the only supervisor I needed," he said, voice terrifyingly calm. "I hope you maintain that confidence when you are answering to a federal judge. Take him out of my sight." "Move!" the FBI agent barked, hauling Harlan toward the door. The officer's legs gave out. He had to be practically dragged out of his own station, crying openly as he passed the very cage he had locked Brooks in just hours earlier. Brooks looked at Rookie Reed, who stood frozen against the wall. "Officer Reed." Reed flinched. "Yes, sir. You knew what was happening was wrong. I saw it in your eyes. But you lacked the courage to intervene." Brooks's voice softened. "A uniform doesn't make you a good man. Action does. Think very carefully about whether you are meant to wear that badge." Brooks walked out of the station, flanked by the MPs. The crisp October night air felt good on his face. As he approached his Tahoe, surrounded by federal agents securing the perimeter, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his keys, and started the engine. The nightmare for Elijah Brooks was over. But for Clayton Harlan, Thomas Weber, and the corrupt system of Oak Haven County, the true devastation was just beginning. By dawn, the small town of Oak Haven, Virginia, was no longer a sleepy municipality. It was a federal crime scene. The rising sun illuminated a fleet of satellite news trucks lined up along Route 29. Word had leaked from the Pentagon press office, intentionally and with surgical precision. The headlines splashed across every major morning network from New York to Los Angeles. Rogue police department raided by FBI after false arrest of three-star Army general. Inside Oak Haven, police headquarters, the atmosphere was chaotic, but highly organized. Special Agent in Charge Bradley Walsh had established a temporary command center in what used to be the department's break room. More than 40 federal agents, forensic accountants, and military investigators systematically dismantled the precinct's entire history. Every filing cabinet was emptied. Every computer hard drive was cloned. Decades of dashcam footage, radio logs, and internal memos were boxed up in crisp white banker boxes. Chief Thomas Weber sat in his own office, though he was no longer in charge of it. He was sweating through his uniform shirt, flanked by two stone-faced FBI agents. Across the desk sat Assistant Attorney General Richard Hayes, who had taken a red-eye flight from D.C. to personally oversee the decapitation of the department. "Chief Weber," Hayes said, voice calm but laced with venom. He dropped a thick printed stack of emails onto the desk. "My cyber division has been going through your internal communications for exactly 4 hours. Do you know what they found?" Weber swallowed dryly. "Mr. Hayes, I can assure you that Officer Harlan's actions—" "Save the script," Hayes interrupted, holding up a hand. "We found a coordinated, department-wide mandate to target out-of-state luxury vehicles driven by minorities. We found emails from you specifically instructing your officers to leverage asset forfeiture laws to seize cash and vehicles to fund your department's pension plan. You weren't running a police force, Chief. You were operating a state-sanctioned highway robbery syndicate. That is a mischaracterization of standard interdiction protocols," Weber tried to argue, though his voice was shaking. Hayes leaned forward. "You arrested the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations of the United States Army. Your officer attempted to breach a Level 4 cryptographic transport container holding Pacific Fleet deployment schedules. The Secretary of Defense was woken up at 3 a.m. because of your greed. You are not facing a civil rights lawsuit, Chief. You are facing a federal RICO indictment. Stand up." Weber blinked, stunned. "Stand up? I have a town to protect." "The Oak Haven Police Department no longer exists," Hayes stated coldly. "The Virginia State Police and the County Sheriff are assuming all patrol duties in this jurisdiction, effective immediately. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of law." As Weber was frog-marched out the front doors past the flashing cameras of the National Press Corps, the final pillar of Oak Haven's corrupt regime crumbled. 50 miles away, inside the sterile, windowless interview room of the Alexandria Federal Detention Center, Clayton Harlan was experiencing a psychological freefall. Stripped of his badge, his gun, and his uniform, he wore a bright orange high-visibility jumpsuit. He sat at a steel table, shivering slightly in the over-air-conditioned room. Across from him sat a visibly exhausted federal public defender named Peter Gannon. "I need you to understand the reality of your situation, Clayton," Gannon said, rubbing his temples. "You are not in state court. You are in the federal system, and the United States government is treating you like a domestic terrorist." "I made a mistake." Harlan slammed his cuffed hands against the table. "I thought he was a drug runner. He was driving a Tahoe. He gave me attitude. He wouldn't let me search the car. How was I supposed to know he was a general?" "Because he handed you a valid driver's license with his real name, and when you ran it, he came back with zero criminal history," Gannon fired back, losing his patience. "Because he told you he was carrying federal property. Because he invoked his rights calmly and clearly. You ignored all of it because you wanted to play cowboy." Gannon opened a manila folder. "Let's review the charges. Deprivation of rights under color of law, false imprisonment, assault, and here is the nail in your coffin, Clayton, attempted espionage." Harlan's eyes widened in sheer panic. "Espionage? I didn't spy on anyone. I was trying to find dope." "You attempted to breach a top-secret Department of Defense container. Ignorance of what was inside is not a defense under the Espionage Act. The military prosecutors are arguing that by attempting to open that case in an unsecured environment, you willfully endangered national security. The Department of Justice is refusing to offer a plea deal. They are asking for 25 years in a federal penitentiary." Harlan buried his face in his hands. A loud, ragged sob echoed in the small room. The arrogant predator who had stalked Route 29 for years was completely gone, replaced by a broken man terrified of the consequences he had finally summoned. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Potomac River, the atmosphere inside the Pentagon was distinctly different. Lieutenant General Elijah Brooks stood by the reinforced windows of his E-ring office, looking out over the Washington Monument. He was back in his Class A uniform, the 3 silver stars gleaming on his epaulettes, his chest heavy with rows of colorful ribbons and medals. The door opened behind him. General Jack Stanton, the Army Chief of Staff, walked in holding a cup of black coffee. "The FBI just confirmed that Chief Weber is in custody," Stanton said, taking a seat at the polished mahogany conference table. "The Oak Haven Department has been entirely disbanded. The DOJ is auditing every single conviction stemming from arrests made by Harlan and his shift supervisors." Brooks turned away from the window. "What about the rookie, Officer Reed?" "Cooperating fully," Stanton replied. He gave the FBI a sworn statement detailing Harlan's entire fabrication of the traffic stop. "He resigned this morning, said he didn't deserve to wear the badge if he couldn't stop something like that from happening." Brooks nodded slowly. "Good. At least one of them had a conscience, even if he found it too late." Stanton took a sip of his coffee. "You know, Eli, when you called me from that payphone, I thought you were kidding. I've known you for 20 years. You survived Fallujah, you survived the Korengal Valley, and you get taken down by a jumped-up traffic cop in rural Virginia." "It's not a joke, Jack," Brooks said, voice lowering as the weight of the experience settled over him. "I have 3 stars on my collar. I have the direct ear of the president. And none of that mattered when I was sitting in that driver's seat in civilian clothes. He didn't see a general. He saw a target." Brooks walked over and sat across from Stanton. "We train our soldiers to have discipline, to de-escalate, to adhere to strict rules of engagement in active war zones. If my soldiers acted the way Harlan acted in a hostile country, they would be court-martialed and sent to Leavenworth. Yet men like him are given a badge and a gun and told to police their own communities with absolute impunity." Stanton remained silent for a long moment. "So what do you want to do, Eli?" "I want to testify," Brooks said, eyes locking onto Stanton's. "I want to take the stand at his sentencing. I want him to look at the man he tried to destroy, and I want the record to show exactly what happens when power is left unchecked." 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, was packed to absolute capacity. This gallery was filled with journalists, civil rights advocates, military personnel, and victims of the Oak Haven Police Department who had driven hours just to witness this moment. Officer Clayton Harlan sat at the defense table. He had lost 30 pounds. His skin was pale, and his hands trembled continuously as they rested on the polished oak. He wore an ill-fitting gray suit provided by his public defender, a far cry from the tactical gear and polished badge he used to wear like a crown. The presiding judge, the Honorable Margaret Winston, was a formidable woman known for her zero-tolerance policy toward public corruption. She peered over her reading glasses at the defense table, expression unreadable. "Mr. Harlan," Judge Winston said, voice projecting clearly through the massive courtroom, "you have pled guilty to 2 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, 1 count of false imprisonment, and 1 count of reckless endangerment of classified materials. Before I pass sentence, the prosecution has called 1 victim impact witness." Assistant Attorney General Richard Hayes stood. "The government calls Lieutenant General Elijah Brooks." A hush fell over the courtroom. The heavy wooden doors at the back of the gallery opened. General Brooks walked down the center aisle in full dress uniform. Every footstep echoed with precision. As he passed the gallery, 2 rows of military officers who had come to support him stood at attention. Brooks took the witness stand. He swore the oath, voice deep and steady. He did not look at Harlan. He looked directly at Judge Winston. "General Brooks," Hayes began, "can you describe the events of that night and the impact they have had on you?" "The events are a matter of public record, Mr. Hayes," Brooks said calmly. "I was stopped without cause. I was assaulted. I was detained unlawfully. But the impact of that night extends far beyond my personal inconvenience." He finally turned his head. His piercing gaze locked onto Clayton Harlan. Harlan physically shrank in his chair, unable to maintain eye contact, staring down at his trembling hands. "When I took the oath to defend the Constitution of the United States," Brooks continued, voice echoing in the silent room, "I understood that I might be called upon to face enemies of freedom on foreign soil. What I did not expect was to find an enemy of freedom wearing the uniform of an American police officer." The courtroom was so quiet, a pin drop would have been audible. "Mr. Harlan did not pull me over because of a traffic violation. He pulled me over because he felt entitled to dominate someone he viewed as inferior. He weaponized the law to serve his own ego. He assumed that because we were on a dark, isolated road, he possessed absolute power." Brooks turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I command soldiers who hold the power of life and death in their hands every single day. The foundation of that power is accountability. When accountability vanishes, authority becomes tyranny. Clayton Harlan is a tyrant. He used his badge as a shield to terrorize citizens, believing he would never be caught. I am asking this court to remind him, and anyone else who shares his mindset, that no one is above the law." Brooks stepped down from the stand. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, an immovable force that had utterly crushed whatever defense Harlan's lawyer had prepared. Judge Winston adjusted her glasses. She looked down at Harlan. "Clayton Harlan," she began, voice ringing with finality, "you betrayed the public trust. You engaged in a pattern of predatory behavior that culminated in the assault and abduction of a decorated military officer. You endangered national security out of sheer ignorance and arrogance." Harlan squeezed his eyes shut. A tear slipped down his cheek. "You believed that the law didn't apply to you," Judge Winston continued. "You are about to find out exactly how rigorously it applies. On the charges of civil rights violations and false imprisonment, I sentence you to 180 months in federal prison. On the charge of reckless endangerment of federal property, I sentence you to an additional 60 months, to be served consecutively. A collective gasp echoed through the gallery. 20 years, federal time, no parole. You are remanded into the custody of the United States Marshals. Judge Winston struck her gavel. The sharp crack sounded like a gunshot. Court is adjourned. Two heavy-set U.S. Marshals immediately stepped forward, grabbed Harlan by the arms, pulled his arms behind his back, and snapped the heavy steel handcuffs over his wrists, the exact same way he had cuffed General Brooks 6 months earlier. As Harlan was led out of the courtroom, shuffling toward a future confined to a concrete cell, General Elijah Brooks walked out the front doors of the courthouse. The Virginia sun was shining brightly. The nightmare was over. The predator had been caged, and a dark, corrupt stretch of Route 29 was finally safe. If this story of absolute karma and justice served sent chills down your spine, you are not alone. It is a powerful reminder that true authority is not about the power you wield, but the restraint and integrity you show when no one is looking. Clayton Harlan thought he was untouchable. He learned the hard way that nobody is above the law. If you loved this dramatic account of accountability, hit that like button, share this with someone who appreciates a masterclass in karma, and subscribe for more incredible true-to-life stories. Stay safe out there.